Guys, thank you for having me once again. It's always a pleasure to be with you, not only for what your mission is, but also the learnings in this environment. It always feels like home for me. So as usual, I wish I could stay longer, but I can't. I'm going to be able to present, and I got to get to DC for another event later. But I'm going to get started because, yeah, the world is a little bit complicated right now, and there's a lot going on. I'm going to start with one of my favorite quotes, and this is Peter Drucker, who's the father of modern management and leadership. But, you know, the thought process is the danger is not the turbulent times. It's thinking of these turbulent times with yesterday's logic. And that is what I'm going to challenge you with, because what I can tell you right now, we're in an environment that every day I wake up, it's a different day. And it feels different as far as what I knew yesterday and went to sleep thinking I knew is very different this morning that I wake up. And it's going to force you to look at the world very differently, and I want everybody to get comfortable with that. But I was talking to Scott earlier. We were having this conversation. We live in a confusing world, and I wanted to show you this chart. This is a company called All Sides Media Bias, and this has become my most requested slide outside of a hamburger slide I showed at one time about food costs way back when. But if you look at this chart, All Sides Media Bias is not a media company. They're an analytics company. And what they do is analyze all media, and what you will see, there is a center, little left, little right, far right. Where you're getting your information has a point of view. Where you're getting your information has a narrative. It doesn't mean they're lying to you. It means they're telling you what they want to tell you. And you have to know that, or you get sucked into these narratives. If there's any advice I can give you in today's environment, is it's a good time to have your noise reduction headphones on. Quit paying attention to all of this. And anytime I read something, anytime I hear something, you know what's the first thing I do? Is I ask, what's the source? And then I go research it. And can I confirm it in multiple sources? Because if I can't, it's probably not true. And you're going to have to get really good at that. Literally, the other day, I'm riding to the airport, and seriously, it was just 2 nights ago. My wife calls me because we're talking, and then she's telling me that she read this thing, and I'm like, she goes, is this true? And I said, where'd you get it? I go, Facebook. I go, probably not. But she's good enough to ask, and what I was telling her is most people don't. They get sucked into that right away, and they start to understand it. Everything you're going to see in my presentation comes from the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times. I used to really claim Axios. This is from 2022, so I'm going to show you it moves. I'm going to show you the 2025 slide and show you some of this moves. But is it any surprise that CNN's on the far left, Fox News on the far right, number one on each side, and we can't agree on anything? And we sometimes think we're on different planets. It's because of what you're being fed. So you need to really understand that. And where I know it's changed dramatically, I have to apologize to anyone who's heard me speak over the last 2 years, because I used to say that the BBC was the gold standard in journalism, and I can't say that today. And if you don't know what's going on with the BBC, a whole bunch of executives got fired because they took a clip of President Trump that literally were 45 minutes apart and played it as it was one speech. And they got caught with that, and they used to be a journalistic gold standard. If the BBC can get there, anybody can get there. You have to be very, very pervasive as far as what you're researching, what that looks like. But this is 2025. And what will you see? CNN is still off center, it's still left, but it's moving more to the center. And that's because of new ownership. And new ownership made it a demand that they were going to try to get back to being journalists. You can see that there hasn't been a lot of movement in the middle. The BBC, I promise, won't be there in the 2026 rankings. But you can see Reuters is there, Wall Street Journal is there. They don't show the Financial Times up there, but the Financial Times is kind of boring. It's all about finance, but it's about the world, and it's about business. That's why I pay attention to it. So again, what you read really matters, and where you get your information really matters. A couple of things. Why do I care about this so much? What you read is what you believe. What you believe is how you feel. How you feel is how you behave. That's why I'm concerned. We get sucked in, and like right now, there's this malaise going on in our country that, God, everything's so bad, and the economy's bad, and I'm going to show you the data doesn't support that. But we feel it. They've actually called it a boom session. You know what that means? Economy's booming, but we feel like it's a recession. That's the new term, a boom session. Because the media has convinced us that everything is so bad. We're not exploding, we're not shrinking, we're just kind of steady. if you can get to the numbers. And that's what I'm going to be able to show you. So a lot to go on. Where do you start as you're walking through the forest? Outside of your faith, the other side I would point out, I love this book. It's Charles Mackay. He's an English author. This is a children's book, but I've given it to clients. I've given it to employees. It has some of the best life lessons you will ever read. Apple, make it easy for you. If you don't want to go get the book, they actually released on Apple TV an animated version of this book. The reason I'm pointing this out, I'm going to show you a clip right now. And this is a fire chief in London that is giving advice on a podcast on the advice he has for overthinkers. Not accusing of anyone in this room of being an overthinker, but letting you know that this advice is something that I live by. It's how I see the world. It's how I approach my life. And I just think it's great advice. So let me show you this clip and we'll get going.
What is your advice to overthinkers?
A quote that has helped me immeasurably. And it's from a book called The Horse, the Boy, the Fox and the Mole. And one of my favorite quotes out of the whole book is a boy and a horse are in the woods. And the boy says to the horse, I can't see a way through. And the horse says, can you see your next step? And the boy says, yeah. And the horse says, then just take that.
Wow.
And it hit me.
Yeah.
All of the time, we look at the goal, we look at the future, we look at the end game, we look at how long a journey it is, and we feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Instead of that, just go, right, I'm not going to worry about that because that will come. With each step, you will get closer to that. So I don't need to worry about how far away it is. All I need to focus on right now is my next step.
I love the advice, and by the way, it's how I look at the data. I try not to get over my skis. When I'm going to tell you about what's going on in the Middle East and when I'm going to tell you what's going on in our economy, I'm telling you what we know. Not what I'm guessing is going to happen 6 months from now. And, you know, everything going on in the Middle East, I've made it very simple. If it lasts 6 weeks, it's not a big deal. If it lasts 6 months, we're going to feel it. That's the issue. And nobody knows what that looks like with the timeline. So I don't get over my skis and I don't get anxious that this could be 6 months. 3 months down the road, I'll start to get anxious if it's still going on. But right now, there's no need to. So know what you know. I'm going to talk about 25 and we're going to move on. But I love this metaphor. I call it in the rearview mirror right now when I talk about 25 because we need to talk about 26, not 25. But the rearview mirror is a really great metaphor for life. There's a reason your rearview mirror is this big and your windshield's this big because you're always supposed to be looking forward. You need to know what's behind you, but you shouldn't be looking behind you or you will crash the car. That is the metaphor. So as we start to move forward, I'm going to talk a little bit about the global economy and what we looked at. And what I wanted to point out is how fast we pivot as analysts in this world. So this was Liberation Day, April 2025. Liberation Day, by the way, is an economic term today. It was the day that President Trump announced global tariffs on 200 countries. That's why it's called Liberation Day. If you look at any economic report, you'll see Liberation Day with a little arrow. April of 2025, and what I wanted to point out, the World Economic, or the International Monetary Fund, they took the global GDP forecast down from 3.3 to 2.8%, as you can see. Right when the tariffs were announced. They thought it's going to drop a 0.5 percentage point. I kept telling people I thought it would come back. In July, they revised it to 3.0. In October, they revised it to 3.2. And at the end of the year, we ended up back at 3.3, exactly where we started. So what does that mean? All of that chaos last year meant nothing to the economies. It meant everything to our sanity, but it meant nothing to the economy. That's what ended up happening when you start to look at the numbers. And this is why I say not to get sucked in. We don't know. I only know what I know. And when the tariffs are coming in, everybody tells you we're going to have hyperinflation, this was going to happen. None of that happened. Now, it could have happened, but it didn't. I wait until it happens before I get excited about it. So we don't have to look at that. Now, when we look at the hotel industry, here's an interesting part, and you can't look at anything in a binary fashion. So you can see in 2025, it was the first time that we had negative RevPAR growth in our industry without a recession. But it's basically flat. It's 0.3%. And if you started the year and told me we were going to have a government shutdown for 45 days, we were going to have this global tariff chaos, and we were going to end up pretty much flat, I would have taken it. And that's kind of where we ended up. But there's another piece of the story. This is the hotel side of the equation. And you can see right now what's happening in the hotels, and this is important for all of you that plan meetings. The orange line shows you coming out of the pandemic, this was all a transient story. It was all about transient guests hitting all the beaches. That's where we were getting people just spending like crazy. They've been locked up in their houses for 18 months. They're going. And everything happened. Then you can see it flattened out. And that peach line that's kind of hockey stick growth is all group. So why does that matter to you in this room? That's what you're competing with when you're looking for space that we don't have enough of. Group is the growth point in our industry. It's the growth point in demand, it's the growth point in rate that I'm gonna show you, and that is not slowing down anytime soon. We have 2 major convention centers out of order right now. The Austin Convention Center is gone as they're rebuilding a new one, and Dallas Convention Center has relocated 50 groups as they expand and redevelop. So think about that. We've lost 1.5 million square feet of meeting space at a time we don't have enough of it. So that is going to continue to compress the markets. But this is the point that I think is really important. I showed you the industry being down. If you add short-term rentals, i.e. Airbnbs, we grew. We grew by 4%. So the interesting part is the growth is in other aspects of our industry. I care about the travel patterns. I don't care about the number. And what the travel patterns are telling us, people are traveling, we're really busy. And by the way, that's not even including cruise lines that are up 28%. And cruise lines are a hotel room on the water that aren't included in these numbers. So you're seeing a very huge dynamic of people that still want to travel. And last year what happened, this is what I call the great pause. You see everything in red, that was a decline in group business. Started on Liberation Day. It started on April when the president made his announcement and everything dropped, everything froze. The markets tightened, companies tightened, we all tightened. I told my wife, don't look at your 401k for 60 days. Nobody wants to see it, it'll come back. But everybody froze for a second. And we saw it in our industry and it was very impactful. We're fully back towards the end of the year. I won't spend a lot of time. We're only negative in October and November because of a bad comparison. You got to remember the hurricanes last year in 2024. Those hurricane comparisons overinflate these numbers. So we're actually up in October and November if you normalize. But what I wanted to point out, you see this? We were down in group demand, and yet group rate continued to grow. Group rate is not going down. And I get this question always from clients. When are things going to go get cheaper? Never. They will never get cheaper. Our costs aren't getting cheaper. It can't go backwards. And this is the first time in my career that I hear this from owners and management groups. It is better to not take a group than to take a group at the wrong price because it will cost you money. And I'm going to show you the numbers. Hotels' all-time record revenue and gross operating profit percentage is declining. Means they're losing profit year over year on all-time revenues, and that's because of cost. Now the good news, there is good news in there. By 2027, that'll reverse, and it's all because of labor. By the way, number one cost to a hotel has been and always will be labor. We're a labor-heavy industry. To an airline, it's number 2 behind jet fuel, and we're going to talk about jet fuel in just a second. And the other part is you got to separate luxury and upper upscale. So luxury and upper upscale, like the hotel that you're in right now, very different story than the economy and mid-scale hotels. And the challenge is it's luxury and upper upscale that have meeting space. So this is what you have to pay attention to and what's happening in that world. And you can see this from Deloitte. This gray line is 0. What it's showing you is luxury is easily growing at 5% consistently across the board. Economy is shrinking. And it's the economy market that's shrinking. It's the same in our economy right now. We have a luxury shopper and a bargain buyer. 2 different audiences completely, and 2 different struggles going on in that environment. This is a great visual, and I'm going to show you the next one's really interesting, but these are the top 25 markets in the United States. RevPAR, again, in the simplest form is rooms revenue. So rooms revenue is up in 9 cities, every other city is down, so kind of a mixed bag, and that's a normal year once you got back to 2019. If you're looking at 2019, it'd be about the same thing. It's about 50-50, some cities doing well, some cities shrinking. That's overall RevPAR. When you look at group average rate, it's up in every city. When I told you group is where the growth is where the growth is on rate, and it's where the growth is for hotels as far as demand. And you can see now a little bit of nuance and a little bit of noise in the numbers. What's going on in New Orleans? That's called Super Bowl. And what's going on in Washington, D.C., that's called inauguration. So you have some noise in the data, but outside of that, you see everybody growing. Chicago and Los Angeles are the exceptions. People always ask why. Has a lot to do with optics. When you have protests in the middle of the cities, in the middle of the year, it will have an impact on the group side of it. And it's not because people are taking a position. Nobody wants to mess with it. Like nobody wants to take their group and be in the middle of some kind of protest. So that just kind of takes it off the board for a short period of time. And you can see that across the board. This, I think, is interesting. If you look at this chart, the red line is the group average rate around the country. every city you see on here runs a premium to the group average rate. In other words, if you're trying to take your groups to those cities, they're going to cost you more. They're more expensive. They run higher. That's what they do. Number one in the country is Montana. At almost an $80 premium, I blame Kevin Costner. I blame Yellowstone. But you look at it and it's crazy. And by the way, we're bad with geography. That's Wyoming, not Montana, but Montana's still winning. You look at that, everybody's running this premium. San Francisco is back in a big way. Vegas is still there. It's still going to be one of the kings. It's always going to be a top three. Please do not read about the death of Vegas and take it as gospel. That's not true. It is truly not true. I used to be the chief sales officer for 7 years in Vegas. I'm very in tune with what's happening. They had a really soft summer. And if you're watching social media and you hear about Vegas, that's a bunch of locals that are mad that their parking got taken away. That's it. Those are some trolls that we have in that area. Vegas is having the best group calendar in 26, and we'll have a record year in 2026. And yet nobody's talking about that. They have a soft summer, and it's all alarm bells going off. We do pay attention to Vegas because Vegas is a microcosm of the entire industry. How Vegas goes, we will see in the industry at least a few months later. So it's something to pay attention to. Right now, Vegas is rocking. So we get to 2026, and what are we looking at? A lot of numbers on here, but I was just showing you a comparison between 25 and 26. And you can see occupancy is basically flat. And this is where it gets confusing. Our average rate is only growing by 1%, but I promise you, you're going to get a bid from a hotel that comes back and it's growing at 5%. That's the difference between luxury and the rest of the market. And I'm going to break that down in more detail because unfortunately, we have more economy and mid-scale hotels as an industry than we do luxury and upper upscale, so it overweights the index and brings everything down. You'll see it in another slide coming up. But here's the biggest point, because I still have clients that want to talk about 2019. Our average rate in 2019 as an industry was $131. Today it's $162. 2019 has zero relevance in today's conversation. This is the new baseline. It's a $30 increase, and that may seem extreme to you. By the way, that is running lower than the rate of inflation during the same time frame. Everything else got more expensive than hotel rooms at the rate of inflation, but it's still a big number if you have any stakeholder that's trying to reference what you spent in 2019. Just doesn't have any relevance anymore, so it's a good chart for you. And when we look at what's happening this year, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in January. Don't read anything into this because we started January out of the gate on fire. And that was with New Year's falling in the middle of the week, which was a surprise for us because New Year's falling in the middle of the week is usually soft. And what you're seeing is the green is occupancy. So we had a huge push in people wanting to stay in hotels. But if you look at what's happened between February and March 14th, we've had 5 out of 6 weeks that's averaged over 3% growth. We have been really growing tremendously. Where have you heard that? And again, it feels like we're doing poorly. That is a whole roll-up of the United States, and we're actually doing extremely well. And I'm going to show you some other data that shows this, but this is the week of February 1st through 7th. We always look at this week because there's a large demand driver. That demand driver is Super Bowl. And you can see Super Bowl was up $2.67 the last year. Vegas, with no other driver, was up $1.26. Top 25 markets, weekday up 0.72. Weekend market, you can see everybody's up. That's the point. Everybody was up during that week. We're seeing a lot of health and a lot of demand in the industry. And by the way, this is an important one because some of you have programs on weekends, and sometimes holiday weekends have been a good value for you because hotels have soft holidays. Not going to be the case this year because of where the holidays are falling. If we're the ones that fall on a weekend, we're seeing massive demand. And it may price you out of certain areas, so you just need to be aware of it. If you have a holiday that falls on the Saturday or the Friday, it's a challenge. If it falls on a Thursday or Monday, not as much. But if it falls on the weekend, we're seeing huge demand for that. So you may get a little bit of friction from the hotels as far as availability and or pricing. And then, of course, the biggest conversation is World Cup. And World Cup right now is forecasted, as you can see, June and July, to be a 12% push in RevPAR, and then overall our growth for the year is really coming from World Cup. It's coming from the summer period and that extra compression we're going to have. A lot of noise in the numbers I want you to pay attention to. We've had some wacky weather, and for somebody who travels every week, I promise you I look like a storm chaser because I have been chasing every single storm this winter. If you remember in January, 70% of the country was under snow. During that first storm in January. The reason that matters, we canceled 20,000 flights just with the first storm. We canceled 12,000 flights the second storm. The storm that hit Charlotte canceled 8,000 flights. And the storms we just had a week and a half ago that were all the tornadoes and the winds that were coming up the middle of the country, we canceled another 8,000 flights. We've canceled almost 50,000 flights in the first quarter. And I just showed you 5 out of 6 weeks that are growing at 3%. We're really healthy. We've had all this disruption and we are still doing extremely well. This will just show you that they do a comparison. I mentioned the hurricanes, so they are looking at the hurricane markets. You're down because of the hurricanes last year, but then they look at the winter markets, and what's telling you the total U.S., we're just up and down. It depends on where you are and what your performance looks like. I'm stressing this because don't read anything into the numbers that we report for first quarter. There's a lot of disruption in these numbers that you're going to have to take into consideration. And Florida, I was down in Fort Lauderdale, again, chasing the storm, got canceled in Charlotte, needed to be in Fort Lauderdale. I get there, they had record temperatures that they have not seen in 40 years. Now, why does that matter? Your orange juice is going to get really expensive in 18 months. They lost a lot of crops. Serious, true story, and I have to teach this. I love that we were talking science because I learned something. I'm in Fort Lauderdale, and they're showing the news, and iguanas are falling out of the trees because they were freezing. And then I see them sweeping them up, and I am devastated because they're coming together. They were bringing them together so nobody steps on them because when they defrost, they come back to life. I did not know that, just FYI. So I learned something down there. It was a little bit of a science piece for me. The other thing we're looking at right now, and this is what I keep stressing, luxury upper upscale, economy mid-scale, upper mid-scale. You can see a big differential. Luxury upper upscale growing. Why does that matter? It's where your meeting space is. It's this type of hotel. That's still growing and growing at a good clip. Everything else is shrinking. It is the split economy. It's the way I always phrase this. It's why Louis Vuitton can do really well and the dollar store filed for bankruptcy. That's the split we have right now. And it doesn't mean that lower income earners are underwater. The way I heard the CEO of Wells Fargo and Bank of America say it, they're just living on the edge. They're not able to save. They're spending everything they're earning. They're not saving right now. Earlier, they were saving and spending. Right now, it's spending what they're making. So that is kind of that differential we're seeing across the board. But it is a luxury story. The airlines are now talking about it. Delta will actually sell more premium travel than they will main cabin in revenue this year. Doesn't mean they have more premium travel seats. It just means they're going to sell more revenue in premium and first class. They can't keep up with it. And if you look at how they've reconfigured their planes, all you have to do is when you look at this chart, everything in orange, anything in orange and anything in that lighter green up here, those are all premium seats. They are reconfiguring their planes to take more premium seating and less main cabin. They're still making the same amount of money. They're just splitting it up how they do it. And there is enough interest in luxury spend right now that is going to continue to happen. You're going to see it across the board. I had somebody say, does that mean we're just getting priced out? If I'm not a luxury traveler, I'm getting priced out to travel. I go, no, the reason your airfare's staying down is because these people are paying for it. That's what's keeping the airfares down and keeping it reasonable in main cabin, because premium is actually being able to pick up a little more of the dime. And then if you look at that luxury consumer, this is Wall Street Journal. They're actually spelling it out from a hotel perspective. You can see the large gap between an upper upscale and luxury hotel. And that gap is continuing to grow. They're both growing, but luxury is growing at a much more aggressive pace. And this is probably the best visual I can show you. 602 hotels today that are averaging $1,000 a night as an average rate for the year. And that's around the world. And by the way, that in 2019, it was 179, as you can see. Huge shift. And every hotel company is trying to get into the luxury set because that's where the growth is into the future. And by the way, U.S., you can see, is leading that charge at almost 90 hotels. I'm assuming 40 of them are in Montana, but still there's a lot of growth there. You can see it's going to continue to be there for a while. Profit and loss statement, this is what I was talking about from the hotel perspective. This yellow line is the cost of doing business. It's CPI. It's Consumer Price Index. It's inflation. The cost of our goods, the cost of our service, the cost of our wages. That's the yellow line. The blue line there is the average rate growth in our industry. It is no secret our profit in hotels comes from rate. And if I can't grow my rate faster than inflation, guess what's happening to profit? It's going backwards. That's what's happening in the industry right now. So I say this not to say poor hotels. It's just I hear this thing like there's friction. They're pushing back. Margins are razor thin today. razor thin. And every cost matters. And if there's any advice I can give you as a meeting professional, there is nothing that is a concession that doesn't cost us something. Nothing. I always hear that's a soft cost. There's no such thing. Anyone who says a soft cost, they've never run a business. There is no soft cost. Somewhere it's getting eaten. So I'll give you an example. A 1 per 50 comp policy cost us $2 an average rate. So we negotiated a $200 rate. It's actually $198 now. May not seem like a lot, times 1,000 rooms, $2,000. I only do that because the math is easy. It pays for a lot of labor. That's what we don't understand. Oh, you need staff rooms, 50% off. You need another 20 of those. Just lost another dollar in rate. That means the $200 rate is now $197 in reality. As you go through it, everything has and you know what has a big cost today? The suite upgrades you want, because I have people that will pay full price for it, just like the airlines. So that is a true concession. When I have somebody that's willing to pay $800 for that room that you got a $200 rate on, it's a $600 lost profit opportunity for the hotel. A true concession. Doesn't mean you shouldn't ask for it. It's for you to understand. It's a real concession they're giving you across the board. And if there's any other piece of advice I can give you, if you have not dusted off your RFPs to separate the must-haves from the good-to-haves, you have hotels turning down your business right now because they don't want to deal with it. And they'll tell you they don't have space. But they don't want to deal with it because there's 4 other RFPs that don't have that kind of list. And they want the same space and the same dates at the same rate. So you need to really separate your must-haves from your good. There are must-haves. You know, whoever your stakeholder is, yes, they need the suite. We get that. Do you really need 30 fruit baskets? You know, that's kind of the thought process and what you got to separate today. And it's okay not to take the advice. You're going to get turned down. I started this by saying we have too much compression. We have more groups than we do space. So now you are competing. And I always say, you're in a baby beauty contest and you don't know it and you don't want the ugly baby right now. That's it. That's what you're trying to get to. The best way I can explain it for you, you need to make that RFP look as pretty as possible because you're in a lot of competition for the same space. The other side of this is a better view of it. The blue is representing total revenue growth for hotels. 4% is an outstanding year, by the way. The problem is the red is showing you expense growth at 6.5%. That's the problem. Expenses are still growing faster than revenue. It doesn't mean we're not growing, we're just not growing fast enough to run the business yet. And if you look at this, there is good news in this equation. 2025, the year we just came out of, we lost 4.5% gross operating profit, which means we went backwards by almost 5% literally in profit as hotels. Good thing is this year, that gets reduced to 1.5, and the expectation is by 2027, we become positive again. That's good news for everybody, because if that friction comes away, you're gonna get more flexibility with hotels. Right now, the flexibility is really hard because everybody's so compressed. And the compression is coming from the fact that we're not building hotels. So when you see this chart, you see that dotted line here? That's the long-term running average of hotels that we build in the United States. Over history, we've built at that line level. Look at where we've been since 2020. We're not building hotels. And if you want to know why, it's because interest rates are too expensive. It doesn't pencil out. Just like any of you maybe trying to sell your home or moving, you're waiting for interest rates to come down. Same with builders. But now add multi-millions to whatever that number is, and they're in that type of equation. Now, the ones that are building, these are the top markets as a percentage of overall inventory. So when you the way to read this is Nashville. They're building almost 20% of the current inventory they have in new inventory. Nashville's the hottest market, literally, on the planet right now. And if you look, the way to read this too is the dark brown represents being built right now. The orange means it's in planning. And the problem with planning, to give you some indication, it'll take 32 months to get something built today, which means if I put a shovel in the ground today, you don't see a hotel till late 29, early 30. There's no relief in sight that I can see. And that's the reason I keep trying to tell everybody it's an important time to clean up how you're approaching your business because it's going to continue to be tight. Food and beverage, always our favorite conversation, good news, bad news. This is good news and bad news. We're up 10% to 2019 from McKinsey, up 10% in total food price. Okay, that seems like bad news, but it's really good news because last year when I showed the same number as of January, we were up 25%. So we're not up as much, but we're still more expensive. So there's still a little bit of heat on that. And this is the big issue. I'm glad we're having chicken because beef is really expensive. That literally, there is nothing more expensive than beef right now. And this has to do with, we have a cattle crisis. And this cattle crisis was caused during the pandemic when everybody went into their homes and they quit going to steakhouses, and we're not eating steak every day at home, and we're not eating beef every day at home. Ranchers shredded their herds. And I say that and people think there's a bunch of killing going on. That's not what I mean. They just had less calves because they're very expensive to maintain. And the problem is we've now exploded with demand for beef, and it's going to take 18 months to get those herds back. So we have a supply issue, and that supply issue is going to exist for quite some time. And as you've seen in Montana, they don't have as many ranchers as they do hotels. So we've got to get the cattle somewhere else. It's going to take a little more time. Good thing is, eggs are no longer stupidly priced. Eggs, every 2 years I'm talking about eggs, and we have some bird flu. Good thing is that chickens repopulate very quickly. So we are normalized there. Olive oil is down. I've been telling you that was liquid gold. Oranges had come down, but again, they're going to go back up. But right now, there are a lot of areas are down. This is my biggest concern for food trends moving forward that we're not thinking about. There's an estimation that 25 to 30% of our population will be on a weight loss drug program regimen or coming off one. And what we don't realize is those are diabetic drugs. And if you think about what that means for us as hotels, as meeting organizers, this is from Morgan Stanley 2 years ago. What were people eating less of? Confections, carbonated sugary drinks, cookies, and baked products, i.e. every hotel break we've ever seen. We've got to stop this. And I just presented to a hotel company that runs a bunch of hotels, and I'm challenging them saying, we got to get ahead of this. It's going to be as prevalent as gluten allergies or any other allergy or request. And the biggest thing is they eat smaller portions. They can't eat as much. It's almost like having a gastric bypass. And the reason that matters is how we serve. If we're really going to be inclusive of everybody, you don't want them to feel that they're the outsider here just because of the way they're eating. So how do we balance that, and what does that look like? We're not prepared for this as an industry. And by the way, my first 9 years were in food and beverage. This is kind of where my heart's at, to really say, how do you get ahead of these trends and get prepared? And everything's about protein today. It's all about protein. So how do we put more protein into our breaks? How do we put more protein into our bill? And that doesn't mean putting more beef on our meal. That's not what I'm talking about, but how do we think about our diets a little bit differently? And there's something else I would mention. I'd be remiss if I didn't. We need to look at menu architecture through the life of your meeting. And what I mean by that, when I was at MGM, we did a food waste study, and we did it with Panasonic, and we were trying to capture food, which I should share with this audience. It's really cool because we did it with Catholic Charities and one of the food banks. We created a system that food banks were able to keep our food for 90 days. And usually you can only keep it for 7 days because of spoilage and or getting them sick. And we created a process because it has to do with flash freezing and what that looks like, and you got to do it within the first 30 minutes. Invested $2 million as a company to make it happen so we could teach people how to do it. In that exercise, we also learned, and we don't think about this, again, ex-food and beverage person, if you order an American breakfast and you get a BEO, I know how many eggs, how many sheets of eggs, how many sheets of bacon, how many sheets of potato I'm going to cook, if I'm a cook. And the issue that we found is you've ordered an American breakfast for 3 days, and this is after you've been meeting for 3 days. We're feeding you every hour and a half, and you have a big dinner the night before. What we found is you will not eat as much at that breakfast. We won't consume as much on that last breakfast as we did the first breakfast. When you're coming off travel, you haven't been being fed that way. Big difference. And the reason I say this, meeting architecture, that's a great day for a continental breakfast. And take that extra money and put it into your main gala or your main dinner. It doesn't mean you're spending less. It means you're spending it in a more effective manner. And you won't have as much food waste, which we should all care about as well. So that is a little bit of that menu architecture. And the same thing, you've been eating like that for 2 days. You're building up to a big dinner to finish it off, and then you're going to get out the next morning. That lunch should be very simple. Chick-fil-A is a great option, seriously. Just a really simple, light lunch, nothing too heavy, because you're going to have a bigger dinner, that type of thing. The other thing is mocktails. The amount of non-drinking going on is a big deal. And this is something, it is not a trend, guys. It is something that is changing dramatically, and we have to prepare for it. Gallup's been doing this survey since 1945, and literally, you'll see only 54% of people drink beverages on occasion, alcoholic beverages today. Lowest score in history that we've ever seen. And it's a health and wellness issue. I promise you, people in this room or somebody you know had a dry January. You know, people do this because they want to get healthy. It's almost their cleansing to start the year. And if you look at it, the younger they are, the more prevalent this is. 34 and younger, 66% of people think any drinking is bad for your health. And the reason I say this, we still plan receptions like it's 1999. You know, we've got to rethink our drinking. Having a single mocktail doesn't do it. It's having multiple mocktail options. There is a reason every major beer distributor now has a non-alcoholic version, because they see the trend lines and they're out of business in 10 years if they don't figure it out. And if you don't believe this is true, this is the Bank of America Institute. If you don't subscribe to this, you should, by the way. It's free. Bank of America Institute has some amazing research on the consumer and what happens, and they take small business. They'll take, I'm going to show you refund checks, what's happening. They have the largest insight to the U.S. consumer than anybody else, because more people bank with Bank of America than anybody else. And they were able to report this out. What they're showing you right now, the spending on alcohol is the third lowest in 40 years. I didn't put it in here. You know what has kicked up by 30%? Memberships in health clubs or any type of wellness or fitness program. Huge expense there. So we have a society that's shifting about being more healthy and believing alcohol is a detractor to that. And if you don't believe, this is the biggest pinpoint you should look at, or proof point. The largest beverage distributors in the last 2 years have lost $830 billion in market cap to their companies. Almost $1 trillion that they have lost. So that is why they're getting into non-alcoholic beverages. There are some really great beers. They've now made wines and champagnes. I can't say they're good, but they've made them. So they will get better as we continue to expand with that. But that is the way we're headed. From a travel perspective, I just want to point out the narrative. Again, don't get sucked into the narrative. Nobody around the world wants to come visit the United States. It's just not true when you look at the data. So when you look at this chart, this is everything that has been booked in airlines for January through April through Amadeus. These are the top 10 destinations searched. And then you can see these are the top 10 destinations booked, all in North America except for Toronto or U.S. cities, all of them. So 9 out of 10 are U.S. cities. And then if you look at top origin markets, Mexico is up, UK is up, Italy's up, Philippines are up, Vietnam's up. Not everybody is down. And by the way, yes, we keep talking about the Canadians and the Canadians bypassing the U.S. Mexico is up 1.3 million travelers and up 14%. They have made up 2/3 of what we lost with Canada. Mexico is on fire. And to that point, you always hear people are tightening up. They're not traveling. We're not seeing it. They're not going to spend on travel. We've only broken 3 million people going through TSA, through the airports, 10 times in history, and 8 of them were last year. But I keep hearing nobody's traveling. The numbers don't support it across the board. And then this is interesting, global airline pricing, and you can see 2026, there is a spike. If you were going to be traveling, if you've been traveling over the last 2 weeks and you're going to be traveling over the next 4 weeks, it's going to be much more expensive. And that has to do with jet fuel. And jet fuel is driving that, and this is what happened to jet fuel with what's going on in the Middle East. And again, number one cost to an airline is jet fuel. Number two cost is service, or wages. So you're going to see that consistently build up for you. Good thing is it's coming back down. We think it'll moderate. It should moderate unless, back to my original statement, this lasts for 6 months. Then we're going to have an issue. But I heard Ed Bastian, Delta's our 40-year or 35-year partner. Ed Bastian was on CNBC. The cost or the spike in jet fuel will cost his airline in the first quarter $400 million in expense. And he says most of that is being passed on in ticket pricing. So that is what you're seeing across the board. They're not just going to eat it, they're going to take up tickets. And the good thing about airlines, they don't keep it there. When jet fuel comes down, they'll bring down pricing as well. But that is going to be something that's moderating. The other thing is fact or fiction about World Cup. You know, you keep reading these things, and it's, again, this malaise about World Cup, and it's not going to be a good World Cup. There's 500 million tickets reserved for World Cup. That's an all-time record. Again, I'm a data guy. Data's not supporting the statements. Right now, this is what's happening with the group stage in the first 72 matches, and most of us are really ignorant to World Cup, not really understanding it. The reason I say this, some cities are doing this really well, but you see everything where you see these gaps. Atlanta, for instance, has a program said meet between the matches. If you're looking for a deal, look for these cities around World Cup where they have these gaps in between games, because they're going to be really busy on game days and they're going to be dead right in between. And everybody's been kind of avoiding the World Cup areas, worrying that they were going to be so busy. They're going to be busy when they're busy, and they're going to be really slow when they're not. So there are opportunities. And this will show you the entire group stages and then the round of 32, round of 16, quarterfinals and such. And New York, you can see once New York gets to July, they're done. As far as they will be the place, because that is the closing. All the finals will be in New York. So you're not going to find any kind of good deal in New York. But you can take a look at Philadelphia's wide open. It's going to be wide open in the month of July. And again, everybody kind of protected it. And when you're reading about these blocks being cut or these blocks being dropped, most people aren't used to World Cup. I've been in Super Bowl destinations. The NFL overholds rooms, and then they release them because they're holding them for the teams and the NFL. And once they get those blocks, they let it go. FIFA is not responsible. 0 blocks did they hold for a general consumer coming to watch games. So when you're hearing about these blocks getting moved, once you get the draw, you know which teams are coming. You're going to know which teams are staying where. You're going to know what officials are coming, where the media is going. Once they do all that, they drop the blocks. I have European hotels. They've told me, just wait, it's coming. They knew this because they deal with it all the time. They understand it. We haven't had a World Cup in 20 years. We just don't know. So again, don't get sucked in with the narrative that it's going to be bad. I threw this in because it's the one slide that you can intelligently talk to the World Cup in the United States. 78 matches, 52 in the group stage. It tells you which cities are involved. It is the one snapshot if you want to know what's going on with World Cup. We have an increase for right before World Cup of 3% and then 9% in that right after the group stage. This is an increase in searches for travel to these cities. So it's telling us that there is extra demand there. United States is the largest driver. United Kingdom is right behind it, and the Canadians aren't that mad at us because they're coming. So you can see it. They're number 3 right behind it. And then behind it, or below that, you'll start to see it kind of spread out across the board. And then these are the major cities. Not a surprise that New York is number 1 because it's where the finals are going to be. It's where the finals in the group of 16 and all of the bigger matches will end up. So New York is getting the lion's share of it. Meeting trends. 93% of, this is from American Express Meetings and Events Survey, 93% of North America is very optimistic about our industry, and this is the important one, 95% of them are increasing their meetings and event spend. These are corporations, again, people that may be competing for space you're looking for, and understand their budgets are moving higher because they know there is more cost in the market right now for them to be able to get the space they want. So that is going to consistently be a driver. We always look at this to see what is their mentality. Their mentality is they're going to their stakeholders saying, we need more money. We need more money in our budgets because they're getting more expensive. Number one issue they're all dealing with is how do we make the experience more engaging? How do we get people really connected to what we're doing? And that is a hard one. If you can really start to think about this, I always say words matter. So think about, you no longer have attendees, you have participants. How do you get them to participate in the meeting? Not just sit there. Attending means I'm attending and listening versus participating means I'm actively involved. That's a little bit of a different shake for us in that side of it. This is an interesting one. Golf is back in a big way. Golf used to be the standard for meetings for a long period of time, and then it just kind of went away. And it doesn't mean it wasn't important. It just was no longer a highlight of it. And the reason I'm pointing this out, we've had the largest growth in golf audience since 17 to 2025 that we've seen since the 1990s, which was the heyday of golf. And that is a large growth. I think this is a product of the pandemic, by the way, because it was one of the activities you could get outdoors, keep your 6 feet, everybody was going. Golf courses weren't closed. People could actually do this activity. And if you look at it, the reason this matters, 6.1 million new golfers on a golf course. It's up 25% to pre-pandemic levels. And look at the beginners. It's up 32% with people that just took up the game. And what I think is most impressive, this chart shows you the dark blue is what they call off-course golf. What is that? Being in a simulation bay, doing a top golf activity, doing something around golf but not on a golf course. The reason that matters, that grew 10 million since 2017. And this is the interesting part for me. 52% of all the growth are females. The female audience has exploded, as I think all female sports have. But the female audience for golf is exploded. So if you are one that thinks of golf as a male-oriented, dominated sport, it's no longer the case today. And this is something you're going to have to think about as your meetings continue to progress. And when I look at the beginners, that's the important part. So you have a whole new audience that's coming up, and this is an activity they're going to want to participate one way or another. The Middle East, if you may have noticed, there's a little bit going on over there. So we're going to talk about that just a bit, high level. This is the closed airspace, and from a travel perspective, I try to pay attention to what that means. You can see the flights that are not flying over that zone. And that means this is a live tracker as of yesterday from flight radar, and you can see how planes are having to go around. It's adding hours, and it's canceled a lot of flights. The reason that has to cancel, remember, pilots time out. So on some of these flights, adding a couple of hours really matters across the board. So it's going to be disruptive. What we can see right here, this is all the Middle East, and you can see Abu Dhabi and Dubai. You can see it spike at the end of February, early March. That's everybody who got stuck there because of the airports being closed. And then you can see it just craters. So the Middle East is getting hammered with this as far as what the traffic looks like. And you keep hearing about the Strait of Hormuz. I don't know if you recalled, it was a couple of years ago, I was talking about the Strait of Hormuz where we were having to go around Africa to get supplies here because the Houthis were attacking supply ships. It's the same strait. It's a chokehold, but right now it's an oil conversation and the oil that's getting stuck there from the Middle East. And the reason that matters and the reason I think it's going to get resolved, these are the politics behind the politics. Guess who gets the most of Iranian oil? China. Guess who needs the oil really badly? China. So if there's any pressure coming from what used to be an ally, it's going to be China pressuring the Iranians to say the strait needs to open. So there is politics behind the politics that you have to understand. There's a lot going on that we're not going to see or really be privy to. And again, the narratives can get sensational. Gas as of Friday was $3.96 a gallon. That's the overall U.S. average. I just wanted to point out, if you go back here, literally in June of 22, it was $5 a gallon. So we all need to breathe. We're not at a high point yet. Again, if it goes on 6 months, big difference than going on in a short period of time. And it's not universal. You can see most everyone around the country is under $4 unless you live on the West Coast. And that you can blame the taxes they put on top of the gasoline. That's the reason it's more expensive. But everywhere else around the country, we're under $4 a gallon at the moment. So not completely critical. You can see crude oil. Most people don't see how gasoline is actually built, but crude oil is only 50% of the cost. The rest of it, you have to refine it. We haven't built a refinery in this country in 50 years, by the way. We're building a new one in Texas for the first time. But you can see 11% distribution, and there's the taxes that get thrown on top. That's what's adding to the fuel cost. So crude oil going up, it's only half the cost of whatever you're putting into your gas tank. And then this is really starting to be disruptive in the Middle East. F1 canceled their races in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. And it's just for safety issues, but they had to go ahead and cancel them. U.S. economy, there's the boom session I talked about. They make us look and feel so bad, but overall, inflation has been really steady, holding at about 2.5%. But this is the piece I think people are missing. This is the actual inflation of all these different items since 2019. The reason we feel so bad is because when we hear inflation is going down, it's the rate of growth that is going down. Nothing is getting cheaper. It's just not getting as expensive as quickly. And that's kind of the misnomer. We read going down, we think things are getting cheaper. No, it never will. It's why my dad will tell you that a loaf of bread cost him $0.25 when he was a kid, and now it's $4 a loaf. It will never be $0.25 again. That's inflation baked in, no pun intended, but baked into the price the entire time. That is going to consistently be the issue. And if we look at some things that we're in a structural change in our economy, and I think some of our old metrics, personally, I think the metrics we've looked at, you can't look at the same way. And if you look at this, we're at a high of productivity that we have not seen in this country literally since 2009. Some of it is AI, some of it is automation. We are getting more efficient with the people we have, and that is why we're living in a low hire, low fire environment. We don't need as many people. I'm getting much more work with the people I have because of the tools we're putting in and the automation that's coming around. And you can see we had 130,000 jobs in January. February went 90,000 negative. Everybody's freaking out. Look, this is what's happening. I just want to show you the baselines have changed. When I'm telling you there's structural changes, this old dotted line in 23 and 24, that top dotted line, this is from Ernst & Young. We used to believe you had to have 150,000 new jobs every month to keep the economy growing. They've now revised that to 50,000. By the way, you take those 2 months together, we're averaging just under 50,000. We're right there. And you know why that is? You have a net migration or immigration number that is very different than it was in 23 and 24. That has to factor into the labor numbers. It's a very different labor environment. And I don't know how to factor in that we're at literally a low that we have not seen in 6 decades for federal employees. We have made the government smaller at the same time. We hit a peak, as you can see, literally in 2024, we spiked again to get to 3.1 million federal workers. We're now back down to 2.6. We've always been in this 2.7, 2.8 range. 3.1 was too high, 2.6, I don't know if it's too low. I do know we're actually automating a lot of the government. Some of that may be consistently long-term. We don't know. But all of these changes have gone on, and guess what? I just heard this morning, unemployment hasn't gone up. Long-term unemployment finally hasn't gone up. So this is telling me it all works until you see that we don't have a problem until you start to see unemployment numbers start to spike, and it hasn't happened. And then we had a down Q1, and everyone started screaming recession. This is for GDP. This had to do with everybody pre-ordering stuff that they wanted to get in as far as imports before Liberation Day. They knew it was coming. They were trying to beat the tariffs. So because of that, part of GDP is an export-import variation or a delta between the two. We had heavy imports. We went negative. So I said, well, that means Q2, we're going to go positive because you're going to go through that. We did. We went positive in Q2 at 3.8%. Q3 to me was going to be telling us what's happening in the economy. We grew at 4.4%. Best growth we've seen in quite some time. Again, you remember I told you, we're actually doing better than the media makes us feel sometimes. The economy is actually pretty healthy. And then you hear all this conversation because we went down in fourth quarter in GDP. It was all because of the government shutdown for 45 days. You shut down the government for half the quarter. The government's a big spender, and you can see we actually ended up with a 2.2% GDP for the year. Had you factored in that fourth quarter drop with the government, we would have been right at 3%. That's a really healthy GDP growth for our economy. And then what I look at, you see this black line? That's the corporate environment, which is nice and stable. The blue line or that green line is GDP. That's kind of more volatile. So it means our corporations are doing well. Corporate America's fine. We're just kind of plugging along. Remember I said steady. It's just nice and steady. We don't see a lot of variation to it. So we have some tailwinds coming, and this is why I'm really excited. The bill that was passed last year is now going into effect as of January 1. We're starting to see those implications. Tourism economics scored this to be a 1% head start on GDP for the year. And we're not talking about this enough. So one of the biggest changes is around capital investment for businesses. So let me tell you what that looks like. If I owned a hotel and I wanted to invest in a hotel to renovate it and such, let's say I'm putting $10 million into the hotel, I would have only been able to deduct 40% of that cost the year I spent it. I would have had to take a decade to depreciate the rest of that cost. They'll change in the tax law. If I spend $10 million, I can deduct $10 million this year. That is a huge incentive to actually spend capital. That's why the bill changed. And that's what they're trying to do is stimulate that capital to be invested because they can write it off their taxes immediately. The other thing, and don't, again, believe the media, you see the dark blue is what was held from your paychecks. The light blue is what you're getting back in tax rebates. And those tax rebates have already started to come as people have started to file their taxes. And I will tell you, this is the interesting part. Lower income earners are spending faster those refund checks. Again, Bank of America can see it being deposited and then how it's spent over averages on how they've spent it in past years. And you can see lower income earners, it's getting it into some necessity, a lot of discretionary, and then paying off debt across the board. And then this is the interesting part. This is where I get encouraged. Electronics up, lodging up, airlines up, restaurants up. So people are spending it to travel. They're rewarding themselves. And I think that's why we saw such a good first quarter as well. All this is in there. Rents are falling in all the major cities, specifically in Austin, that it's spiked. And the reason that matters, as rents come down, we spend more. And we have a huge renting population in this country. So we're seeing more money in their pocket. They're actually spending it in the economy more, and we're starting to see that as the dollars get spent. The other tailwinds, small businesses, you can see, highest profit levels they've seen since March of 25. 70% of our economy is still small business. that matters. So small businesses are actually moving and doing well. And then if you look at the CEO surveys, there's 76% believe revenue's growing, 66% believe profits growing, less than 20% are in the negative category. So there's a very positive outlook, very Pareto, very 80-20, as far as 80% of the companies feeling pretty optimistic. And you can see growth pretty optimistic and pretty stable. And this is interesting. The bottom line is consumer sentiment. This is us feeling bad about ourselves again, that boom session. The blue line is our intent to travel. And I love these lines because the way I read this, the bottom line is you paying $6 for a cup of Starbucks and complaining about it while you order 2 of them. That's where we're at. And it doesn't mean we're not spending, we're just complaining about it as we spend. Interesting part, everybody wants to know when interest rates are coming down. You know, they always say history is the best predictor of the future. Not anytime soon. I hate to be the bearer of bad news because every time we have a tall Federal Reserve chair, interest rates stay high. So we just hired somebody that is going to be 6'4". If the metric holds true, and an economist saw this and came up with it, and it actually holds true. The lowest we've had has been with the shortest person we've ever put into that office. So I don't know if that holds. I just found humor in that. I wanted to share with you. The other piece that I'm really encouraged about that we don't talk enough about, and I haven't seen it in any analysis, we have $46 trillion sitting in savings accounts in the United States. They can be defined pension, they could be a 401k, they could be IRAs. $46 trillion, enough to pay off our national debt, by the way. Literally, this will be spent and is in a stimulus over the next 30 years. And when you look at where it's being spent, this is the 401ks, $10 trillion in 401k plans. If you're 72, it's moving to 74. You got to take this money whether you want it or not. The government makes you take it out. And what we're finding is, you know why we have $1,000 a night hotels? Because of this. They have everything they need. Everything's paid. I paid my house off, paid my cars off. It's like playing with house money in Vegas. And what we're finding is people are paying with this with experiences right now. And it's moving across the board. And please don't forget, I keep highlighting this, 75% of all the wealth in this country is tied to a 55 and over audience. And we've ignored the boomers, especially as hoteliers, as marketers for almost a decade. All the money is sitting with 55 and over. You know, I always joke, you know, we planned hotels for the millennials, experiences for millennials, meetings for, you know what the millennials don't have? Money. So we're planning for all of that, and they don't have the money yet. They will, but they don't right now. So it's important to understand where that is. And then this is, to close this out, this is probably one of the biggest shifts that we're not talking enough about. But it is a mass migration of population that is the Carolinas, Tennessee, and Texas. And if you look at where they're coming from, California, New York, Illinois, and New Jersey. Those are the negatives. And that is for 25. It looks the same for 23 and 24. And that net migration is huge. I like to look at different resources. This is U-Haul one ways. It means I rented a U-Haul wherever I'm at, and this is where I'm dropping the truck off. Texas is number 1. Florida is number 2. They're the Carolinas and Tennessee. Consistent no matter what you look at. And then interesting, if you look at, this is employment growth through Oxford Economics, Austin, Dallas, Raleigh, Charlotte in the top 5 as far as employment over the next 3 years. This is where the growth in the country is across the board. Every time you see one of these little curves, that is another corporate headquarters moving to Dallas, Texas. 183 companies have moved to Texas over the last 4 years. The reason this, and you see in the bottom left-hand corner, and Scott called it out earlier, In-N-Out is one of those. But they're not moving there, they're moving to Tennessee, but they're moving out of California. These are all the California companies that have moved out. And the interesting part is Texas now has more people in finance and insurance than the state of New York. It is a finance hub overnight. Now that was 2024, that's the number today. And the reason that matters, many of you may not know, they're now calling it Wall Street versus Wall Street. Love this hat. And the reason this matters is you can see the NASDAQ opened up in Texas 2 weeks ago. They've opened up an exchange, and the New York Stock Exchange under the TXA, it's under the NYSE umbrella, it's TXAE, will open between July 2nd and July 17th. Texas has become the financial hub of the United States overnight. And the reason that matters, everybody used to have a headquarter in New York because of the finance industry. That is why everybody has to have a headquarters in Texas today. Wells Fargo just opened their second biggest headquarters in Texas. They just launched it. It is a trend. It is not, and you know what follows money? Money. It just keeps coming. And that is what is going to continue to come to Texas. It is a Southeast conversation right now. And I said I was going to end with good news at every program this year because there's not enough good news out there we talk about. So we talk about sustainability and what we're doing for the planet. Do you know the last 2 years we've actually shrunk the hole in the ozone layer, and there's an expectation we will completely close it in 20 years? Nobody's talking about it. And that is my issue, that it's not being reported. On top of that, do you know that in Antarctica we just added 100 billion tons of ice in 1 year, which has never happened? You always hear when they're melting. You never hear that they're refreezing. And that is why I'm sharing this good news. And this I'm really excited about. It's the largest vacuum cleaner known to man. They built this vacuum cleaner to pull plastic out of the ocean in the Netherlands. The beauty is that technology will be passed on to other countries so that they'll learn how to pull plastic out of the ocean as well. This is a great indicator. And because of that and other things we are doing, the green sea turtle is no longer considered an endangered species. So we are making progress, guys. That is my good news section. So I'm going to end with one quick video. It's from Jensen with NVIDIA. I think he's one of the smartest guys on the planet, but in addition to that, he's one of the most humble individuals. Denny's is one of our big customers, by the way, corporate customers. If you don't know the NVIDIA story, it started on the back of a napkin with him and his partner in a Denny's when they were building chips for for gaming at the time. Because of that, he comes to every Denny's conference without being invited, but he comes and he will speak, he will take pictures, he says, I'm part of the Denny's family because it started my company. That's who he is. But I wanted to play this clip because he has some great advice for us about how we look at life. We all have hard days. Outside of our faith, it's also having a perspective on how we should be looking at that day. And I'm going to play this clip because I just think it's great advice.
There's a phrase that said you should choose your career based on your passion. Usually people connect passion with happiness. I think there's something missing in that. You want to build something great. It's not easy to do. And when you're doing something that's not easy to do, you're not always enjoying it. I don't love every day of my job. I don't think every day brings me joy, nor does joy have to be the definition of a good day. And so I think that what people misunderstand is somehow the best jobs are the one that brings you happiness all the time. I don't think that that's right. You have to suffer, you have to struggle, you have to endeavor, you have to do those hard things and work through it in order to really appreciate what you've done. And there are no such thing that are great that was easy to do.
I love the message, and the one that stands out to me, nor should joy be the definition of a good day. I always remind myself every day that I am here is a good day, out of the grace of God. You know, when I wake up, it's a good day. And I mean that sincerely. And, you know, you'll hear there's surveys that, you know, our job and the meeting planner job is one of the 10 hardest in the United States, one of the 10 most stressful. My daughter, who just turned 35 this week, she's a nurse on an oncology ward in Tucson, and she's worked in our hotels, and she calls when she's going to and from work. I'm talking to her, and I was telling her that because I had just read the report, and she went, seriously, Dad? And she was reminding me, she goes, seriously, you think that's one of the most stressful jobs? And what she was reminding me of, she said, if I mess up, somebody can die. If you mess up, lunch is late. And what she was reminding me about perspective. It's not taking away the seriousness of what we do. It's reminding ourselves that we need to remain calm in all of this and realize we're not curing cancer here. And I think that's an important statement. So thank you for letting me be with you once again. I appreciate it.